Uflishtim nilchamim b'Yisrael v'yanusu anshe Yisrael mipnei plishtim. The terrible war finally has come. The one that King Saul, Shaul HaMelekh, is terrified to confront. And what happens. As he felt in his heart, the Philistines attacked, the men of Israel fled. It was just a terrible disaster. And many fell on Mount Gilboa. Just to refresh our memories, you had the Philistines based here in Gaza. They came all the way up to Mount Gilboa for the big showdown. So they came up to here, Mount Gilboa. It was here at Endor, that Saul had encountered that woman who had called up the prophet Shmuel from the other world. According to one opinion, another opinion, he didn't really come up from the other world. We've studied that. Here's the terrible, terrible battle. Remember, David is not there. David's down in Ziklag. He's just recovered Ziklag. He's just recovered all the things from the Amalekites. The Amalekites, you'll recall, had taken the women and the children and the possessions, and David took his 600 men, and they recovered everything, their women and their children and the sheep and cattle of the Amalekites, and they had sworn to that Egyptian servant of an Amalekite not to hurt him. And then there was the discussion of who gets the spoils. 600 men had come to battle, 400 went to the front, 200 stayed to watch over the utensils and the military gear and the supply lines. And David issued the order, everybody shares equally. And now we're back into chapter 31. And here in chapter 31 is that terrible battle. And the Philistines pursued Saul. Shaul and his sons, he had brought his 3 sons to battle, Vayakuplishtim et Yonatan, Viet Avinadav et Malkishua b'nei Shaul. And the Philistines, they caught up with all of them, and they killed all of them. Vatechbara milchama al Shaul v'yemtzeu hamorim anashim bakeshet vayachel me'od me'amorim. The archers, the experts in the main weapon of those days, like today's rifles and today's, I don't know, hand grenades, but like think of rifles. In those days, it was the archers, and they located Saul, and they got him, and he was dying, and he said to his number 2, his arms bearer, "You kill me now. You've got a sword. Kill me," so that the uncircumcised, and we talked about that term last week, that the Philistines may not run me through and make sport of me. Let it not be said that they killed the king of Israel. But the arms bearer, the Nosei Kelim, he refused to kill the anointed of God. I just couldn't do it. In his great awe, he refused. He feared God. Saul took the sword and fell upon it. Our rabbis tell us that he basically stabbed himself in the neck, in sort of the carotid artery, and killed himself that way. We'll see more in the Midrash. When the number 2, the arms bearer, saw that his master had killed himself, all was lost, he killed himself also. He realized it's the Philistines are going to come and torture us, and if they don't find him alive, they're going to go for me instead. And he also fell upon his sword and died with the king. So so on that day, Saul, Shaul HaMelekh, King Saul, and his 3 sons, Jonathan is the one we've most famously known, the one who was so close to David, a blood lifelong friend of David. So Jonathan died along with the other 2 brothers, those 3 sons of Saul. He left behind a son who will become king in his stead. It'll be a We'll see what happens. Be partly king. We'll see how that works out. ויראו אנשי ישראל אשר בעבר העמק אשר בעבר ירדן כי נסעו אנשי ישראל וכי מתו שאול ובניו. And as the rest of the Jews from their different promontories, mountaintops, saw the disaster that was unfolding and how all the army of Israel was fleeing in panic, and King Saul is dead and his sons are dead, everybody fled. There was widespread panic among the camp of Israel. The Philistines just routed everybody. And I think for a moment to the modern day era that we live, and what was just quoted recently on one of our Sunday classes, we had this Amir, what's his name? The guy who's the speaker of the Knesset right now. I'm going blank a moment on his name, doesn't matter. And he was representing Israel. They were trying to explain Israel, trying to explain its position to Americans. And he shows up and he, in addition to speaking to non-Jews, they bring him to Boston, Massachusetts, a hotbed of liberalism, to speak to a group of Jewish leftists, basically the Jewish Community Council of Boston. It's a bunch of leftist Jews, and that's the Jewish community of Boston. And he's speaking, and then it's questions and answers, and this lady gets up and says, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm Jewish, and you know the spiel by now. I'm Jewish, and I'm telling you, I hear about all these Palestinians, innocent Palestinians getting killed. You're losing me. You're losing me, and you're losing people in this room. You're losing us. She tells to the Speaker of the Knesset. And he says to her, he says, I have to tell you, there's a very, very smart lady named Golda Meir. And Golda Meir once said, the day that Israel lays down its arms, the day that the Arabs lay down their arms, there will be peace. And the day that Israel lays down its arms, there will be no more Israel. And so, and then he names one or two people whom he personally knew as friends who have died in this war. He says, they've fallen in this war. And I have to tell you, if my choice is between losing dear, dear friends of mine in battle in Gaza or losing you, I'm very sorry to say, but I'd rather lose you. And I think of that as we learn this text over here, right here. This idea that everybody's fleeing. That's what happens. We've been destroyed by the Philistines in this battle, and all the Jews are fleeing, and that's kind of like almost the end of Israel, because they're just coming in from Gaza. They're just streaming in as the Jews flee. The Jews abandoned the towns and fled. Philistines came and occupied them. It's that simple. That's what would happen tomorrow morning if Hamas could do it. And the next day, the Philistines came to strip the slain. They went in the battlefield. I don't know if you've ever seen like a movie of like battles, like even the Civil War movies, like Killer Angels. Is that what it's called? The Killer Angels, was it? By Michael Sha'ara. Turned into a 3-part series about the Civil War, sort of historical fiction. But you see these films of the battlefields of the dead strewn throughout Gettysburg and some of these other battlefields, Shiloh and Chancellorsville. And so the Philistines come. After all, there are a lot of good swords lying all over the battlefield. So they go to get the swords, and maybe some people are wearing jewelry, or maybe they've got other valuables, even shoes. And they go to strip the deceased, the corpses the next day, and they come across Saul. They found Saul and his 3 sons lying there, and they cut off his head. They cut off his head, stripped him of his arm. This is just what he was afraid of. He said he killed himself because he knew this is what they would do. He knew he was dealing with Hamas. That's what these people are. That's what they are. They were animals. They are animals. It was brought up by South Africa at the International Court of Justice that they're trying Israel on charges of genocide. And as part of their testimony, they had Yoav Gallant, the defense minister of Israel, made a statement. You have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, we're fighting animals. And the argument was made in front of the International Court of Justice that the Israelis were dehumanizing them. No, the Israelis were not dehumanizing them. They already dehumanized themselves. They are animals. They are animals. It's very important for us to know. We can't convince the whole world. If we talk to other people, we have to use different language. So be it. But in a Tanakh class of people who are coming to a class like this, so we talk the truth. We go outside, you have to massage it. We don't lie, but we massage it. But when we're talking truth, they are animals. They slaughtered 40 babies in a room. They're not animals. They took babies and they put them while alive in an oven, in ovens. They're not animals. They rape dead women on top of living women. They rape women. They cut fetuses out of pregnant women while they're alive. They're not animals. Of course they're animals. Well, you can't say that. Well, I just did. I said it like 9 times, and I'll say it 400 more times. I have different classes to teach. Of course they're animals. And that's what we were dealing with the Philistines. It's like some people learn Tanakh like it's ancient history. It is ancient history. And it's also present day history. That's why I learned Tanakh. I learned it partly because it's a mitzvah to learn Torah. I think that's why people, even non-Jews, Christians, go to Bible study. Why do Christians go to Bible study at their local church? They want to learn Bible. Why do they want to learn? They want to learn the word of the living God. The Bible is the word of the living God. And so that's part of why and why do we want to learn the part of the word of the living God? Because God is living. He's eternal. The message then is the message of, so instead of calling them Philistines, so we call them Palestines. It's the same thing. The more things change, they're still coming out of Gaza. They're still made out of the same stuff. They cut off his head. It's like it's only yesterday's news. They cut off heads. That's what they do. So first they cut off his head, and that's not all. So they cut off his head and stripped him of his armor. All right, I have no argument with that. He's deceased. You want to take his armor, spoils of victory. What am I going to say? But you cut off his head. Now, if you want to make a defense for the Philistines that you cannot make for the Hamas of today, the one thing you can say for the Philistines is that in those days, they didn't have, honestly, truly, they didn't have photography. They did not have cameramen, camera women, let's call it cinematographers. They did not have news and coverage and newspapers. They did not have DNA and fingerprints. So how did you convey to the countryside of your fellow citizens that we actually killed the king of Israel? So if I have to say, at least for the Philistines, that I cannot say for Hamas, they cut off heads, Hamas cut off heads just for the joy of it. And we know they did it for their joy because they were wearing body cams, and we've seen the videos of them celebrating cutting off heads. There, at least, you could say in biblical times, to prove to the nation that we actually killed the king of Israel, they had to cut off his head. You can make that argument. I mean, did the average citizen, in a time there was no TV and no newspapers and no photography, did the average citizen among them know what the king looked like if they would see his head? I doubt it. But at least you could say that for them. You can't say it for Hamas. They sent the head all around the country like a visiting museum exhibit to spread the news in the temples of their idols and among the people. We've killed their king, because that's the sign we've destroyed the army. They placed his armor in the temple. They didn't just keep it to use it, but they made it a religious sacrament of theirs. The armor of the king of Israel, whom we destroyed. And they took his body and they impaled his body against the wall of Beit Sha'an. That's extraordinary. That instead of laying him to rest, they essentially did the equivalent of crucifying him. So they didn't build a cross. They nailed him into a wall. I mean, that's what it says. They nailed. Taka'u b'chomat Beit Sha'an. They nailed him into a wall. And that's not all. By Shmuel Aleph Yoshvei Yavesh Gil'ad. Now, the people of Yavesh Gil'ad heard about this. It Asher Astu Plishtim l'Shaul. They heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, not only killing him, but decapitating him and taking his torso and impaling it, crucifying it, not a cross. The word crucifixion is from the word cross. Litzalev, litzalev, is because of a tzalav, a cross. But they impaled him. Vayakumu kol ish chayil vayolchu kol halayla. That night, the men, the most heroic, valiant men of Yavesh Gil'ad, in the middle of the night, sneaked over to that wall and took down the body from the wall. Because that body would have been left on that wall until the vultures ate it, or just further deteriorated till an aspect of extraordinary shame and humiliation. So while the body still was fresh the first day or second day, all night
Rabbi?
long, no, I can't interrupt right now. All night long, they sneaked in by Kluit Geviyat Shaul, the Et Geviyot Banav, and they took his body and the bodies of his sons off the wall. They uncrucified it. They took it off. They unnailed it. They took it off the wall by Avo Yavesha, and they brought it back to Yavesh Gil'ad. And by the way, I'll take your question or comment in a moment, Shannon. I will. And they went back to Yavesh Gil'ad by Yisrafu Otam Sham, and they burned all the bodies there. Now you'll think, well, is that very respectful? And the idea is that the bodies already had been decapitated, had been nailed into a wall where bad stuff had been, and that actually was under the circumstances of that situation, given that package of circumstances, decapitation, deterioration for 2 days, nailed into the wall with all that implies. That was considered to be the most respectful way to bring him to a final rest and his soul to go to heaven. By Kluat Atzmotehem, and then they took the bones that remained from the burning. Cremation, of course, is forbidden in Jewish law, very strictly so. This is one of those very unique situations, just as suicide is forbidden in Judaism. Very much so, but this is considered in the Talmud, they discuss it, one of the very rare situations where a person perceives that he or she is being pursued and becomes unstable, either emotionally distraught to the point of losing it, because a normal person doesn't kill himself except in extraordinary circumstances. By Kluat Atzmotehem, they took the bones by Baru Tachat Ha'eshel B'Yavesha, and they buried those bones in Yavesh Gil'ad by Atsumu Shivat Yamim. And then there was a 7-day sitting Shiva. And I want to bring this out, and then I'm going to take Janet's comment question. I want to jump back from 1 Samuel 31, to 1 Samuel 11. This is when Shaul first became king of Israel, going back many weeks in our class to chapter 11. And now that all 40 classes on 1 Samuel are posted on YouTube, if you're curious, you can even go back in your own time to the class we did on chapter 11. In that case, there was a evil king of the Ammonites called Nachash, and he encamped on Yavesh Gil'ad. Nachash the Ammonite marched and besieged the same Yavesh Gil'ad. And all the men of Yavesh Gil'ad said to him, make a pact with us. We will serve you. We're in no condition or situation to fight you. And this animal answered them, I will make a pact with you on one condition, that everyone's right eye be gouged out. I'll make this a humiliation for all of Israel. Do you remember that? That was a few months ago. You remember that one? They don't know what to do, because if they fight him, he'll slaughter all of them. And who wants to make a pact where he's going to take everyone's eye out? The elders of Yavesh said to him, give us 7 days respite, so that we may send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. If no one comes to our aid, we'll surrender to you. You'll have to take our eyes out. Well, we don't know what to do. We can't fight you. When the messengers came to Givat of Shaul, El Givat Shaul, and gave this report in hearing of the people, all the people broke into weeping, because we don't know how we're going to fight this guy. This guy is unbeatable. Shaul, was just coming from the field driving the cattle, and Shaul asked, why is everybody crying? They told him about the situation facing the men of Yavesh Gil'ad. When he heard these things, the Spirit of God gripped Saul, and his anger blazed up. He took a yoke of oxen, cut them into pieces, which he sent by messengers throughout the territory of Israel with the warning, thus shall be done to the cattle of anyone who does not follow me, Saul, and Shmuel the prophet into battle. We are going to war. And anyone too scared to go to war, I'll tear you to pieces. You, an Israelite, one of my people, if you're not at war with us right now, I'll tear you to pieces the way I just did to these oxen. Everyone's going to war. And terror from the Lord fell upon the people, and they all came out as one to war. And he mustered them, 300,000. The men of Yehuda were 30,000. And they came to war. And the messengers who came were told, thus shall you speak to the men of Yavesh Gil'ad tomorrow. When the sun grows hot, you shall be saved. When the messengers came and told this to the men of Yavesh Gil'ad, they rejoiced. They didn't say they're coming to war, but they rejoiced. The men of Yavesh then told the Ammonites, okay, give us till tomorrow noontime. Tomorrow we'll surrender. You can do whatever you like. Eyes, plucking, no plucking, gouging, no. Next day, Shaul divided the troops into 3 columns. At the morning watch, they entered the camp, struck down the Ammonites until the day grew hot. The survivors scattered. No 2 were left together. They were running in every direction. And he saved them. Saul saved the people of Yavesh Gil'ad. And that is why the people of Yavesh Gil'ad, here at the end of this book, risked their lives by Yishmu and the inhabitants of Yavesh Gil'ad, of all the people of Israel, when it was the people of Yavesh Gil'ad who remembered, they had that much gratitude, remembering how he had saved them way back when, chapter 11. They remembered. They risked their lives to bring dignity and assure dignity to his life, to his deceased body. And they came to protect him and to spare him that shame. And just as they had asked for 7 days' time from the king of Ammon, now they fasted 7 days in honor of Saul and his sons. Okay, now let's learn lots of commentaries. I prepared a lot of material, so let's see how much I can get in in this class. First of all, and again, if there are questions, as always, feel free, but just carry very, very deep guilt that I might not finish it. And no, there's no guilt. I will just continue tomorrow, next time. Chapter 9 in Shmuel, and of course, it's understandable we may not remember every single word and every detail. That's why I get paid the big bucks for this. So Shmuel chapter 9, we were first introduced to this man that was being named the new king of Israel. There was a man of Binyamin whose name was Kish, son of Aviel, son of Tzur, etc., etc. He had a son whose name was Saul. V'lo hayaven u'shmo Shaul, bachur v'tov, an excellent young man. No one among the Israelites was more handsome than he, handsomer. He was a head taller. Mishichmo v'mala, gavoa mikol ha'am. He was exceptionally tall. Okay. The Talmud talks about it in Masechet Sota Daf Yud Amud Aleph. The rabbis tell us, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis learned there were 5 individuals in the Bible who were created with a unique physical characteristic that made them stand out. And each of them, their downfall came through that characteristic. For example, Samson, Shimshon, his glory was in his strength. Saul in his neck, Avshalom in his hair, Tzidkiah in his eyes, Asa in his feet. Asa is a king of Yehuda, of Judea, and because of time, I won't be taking out the time to study with you tonight the story of King Asa. Nor will I be studying with you the story of King Tzidkiyahu, the king of Judea, whose eyes were plucked out by Babylonia's King Nebuchadnezzar, or by order of Nebuchadnezzar, when the Jews were exiled at the time of the historic tragedy of Babylonia exiling us from the land of Israel. And Avshalom, I actually mentioned him last week, was the son of David, who rebelled against his father, drove his father out of the palace into exile. But then the tables were turned and his hair got caught against braid. We'll learn about it in its due time. But the ones, Samson, I don't have to take out time because everybody knows about Samson. So Samson, his glory was a strength, and his downfall was when Delilah, secured from her husband the secret of his strength, his hair, told the Philistines, who then cut his hair while he was asleep, and he lost his strength. And that enabled them to seize him and make a mockery of him in their temple, bind him, put him right up against the temple pillars. And you know that story, how he brought the temple down and all those innocent Gaza civilians died by hand of Shimshon. And the Bible, the Tanakh, has absolutely no problem whatsoever with the deaths of all the thousands of innocent Gaza civilians, because the innocent Gaza civilians were not innocent. And they had their hands in all of the terror then, just as they do now. But what about Saul and his neck? Well, we just learned that on the one hand, Saul was a head and shoulders, a neck above everyone else. We just learned that Mishichmo v'mala, he was a head taller than everyone else. So the neck stood out. He had a larger neck. It wasn't an aberration. He was handsome. It's not that he looked weird, like someone with a cartoonish neck. Nevertheless, as the Talmud continues saying in Gemara Sutta, Masechet Sota, Shaul Bet, and Saul stood out literally with his neck, dichtiv, va'ikach Shaul et acher va'yipol aleha. And the way he died, was by falling on a sword. What does that mean, falling on a sword? I mean, it's easy to have an image in your mind that he somehow stood her sword up and fell on it, but how do you stand a sword up? It had to be plunged. You can't really stand a sword up without something. I mean, maybe if you take 2-3 boulders and place it behind boulders, that would take a lot of preparation with chaos going on all around. What happened was he fell with his neck upon the sword. He cut himself in the neck, basically, and that's how he died. Next Midrash. This is from Midrash Shmuel. It says that God he kind of did a revelation. That God showed Adam Harishon, the first man, all of what history would be like. You are the first human being. You are the progenitor of a whole bunch of people. And I'm going to show you all that will unfold until the end of time when the Messiah comes. And it's a midrash. And so as part of that midrash, as he was showing him, so it says, first of all, that God called forth at the time, well, let's back it up a line or so, that's right. It says, Vayamahir Shaul vayipol melo kamoto miyad yatsa lemilchama v'natal shlosha banav imo. After Saul was told the horrifying news when he went to the lady who raised up Shmuel Hanavi, the prophet Samuel, according to those that he raised them up, otherwise it was an apparition, and he perceived this prophecy that he would die the next day in battle with his 3 sons. The Bible, chapter 29 says he went forth the next day into battle with his 3 sons. He accepted his destiny. Yonatan v'Avinadav v'Malkishua. He went with his 3 sons, Jonathan, Abinadav, Malkishua. At that moment, God Almighty called forth his host of angels in heaven, Ba'amar lahem, and said to them, Bo'u ra'u b'riya, shabarati v'shiyatzarti, come and see this extraordinary creature whom I created, whom I formed. Saul, b'noheg sheba'olam. Now the way that other people in the world are, Adam holech lebeit mishteh eno notel b'navimo, mepnei maritayim. Usually when a man goes out to get drunk, to a party, to an undignified evening where he's going to be doing not so dignified stuff, he would never bring his kids with him. He'd never bring his sons with him. He'd be ashamed for them to even see him getting drunk. He'd leave them home, not in a Western, but in real life. But look at this man, even more reason not to bring his sons to a deathly battle for which there's been a prophecy that they'll die, but he knows that's God's destiny that has been decided. He knows for sure he's going to die. And nevertheless, he went into the battle and he brought his 3 sons with him. Sameach. And he was happy to do God's will. He didn't go and just commit suicide. In the end, of course, he killed it, but we know. But he didn't just go in take some kind of poisonous hemlock or something. He went to battle. He did what he could. But when he saw that his destiny could not be reversed, there was a certain sense of joy. He's fulfilling his destiny. Lama al shemidara din pogatbo, because the purpose of life is to live a good, rich life and enjoy yourself and have fun and have a good time and eat good meals and have entertainment and be happy. But the real purpose of life is to perfect your soul. Everything else is sort of like an adornment, and a little bit part of perfecting one's soul is if God put you in a world with good tasting foods and colors and all kinds of fruits of different colors and shapes, and if God took you in a world with grass that's green and sunsets and all kinds of beautiful things and music and art, so he wanted you to enjoy it. And a Jew who is ascetic and goes through life denying himself or herself all of those permitted pleasures is actually deemed sinful for not enjoying all that God created. Nevertheless, we must never forget that the ultimate purpose of life, and all that is just supplemental, the purpose of life is to perfect your soul. Everyone starts from a different place. If you're the child of 5 generations of holy rabbis, you have a much better chance of starting off with where you should be and ending up where you should be. And you'll be judged by God in this lifetime based on what you did with that. If you're the child of 5 generations of mafia figures, well, you're starting off with a lot of demerits, and you'll be judged with the understanding that that's where you began. And what did you do with it? Did you make yourself a better person? And hopefully, and most of us are somewhere in between being the children of 5 generations of rabbis and 5 generations of mafia leaders. Most of us are somewhere in between, but we start in different places. I grew up as an Orthodox kid. I grew up from an Orthodox family. I'm FFB from birth. From childhood, my mother and father taught me, Zichrono Livracha, taught me that I'm not supposed to turn the lights on Shabbos. I'm supposed to eat kosher. I'm not supposed to go into a non-kosher restaurant. They taught me the basics. So more is expected of me than from someone who did not start off from there. Each of us is on his and her own journey. And King Saul, to get maximum reward in the world to come, he had some sin that had to be expiated and atoned for. And we've learned this before with Midrash, refreshing your memory incredibly quickly. He was supposed to wait those 7 days for Shmuel HaNavi before offering a sacrifice. Shmuel was going to offer the sacrifice, and he waited into the 7th day, but did not wait that full 7th day. Remember that one? He was supposed to kill all the Amalekites, but he allowed the king of the Amalekites to remain alive. Remember that one? He went to the city of Nov and he killed all the Kohanim, all the priests, the Kohens in the city of Nov. Remember that one? Now that no Kohens are willing to talk to him or be near him to interpret the Urim and Tumim, and now that Shmuel HaNavi, Prophet Samuel, has died, and he has this horrifying battle tomorrow, he doesn't know what to do, so he goes to a lady to call up a dead spirit in violation of Torah law. So there's that one. Instead of having turned to God in prayer, which is what he should have done, so there's that one. So he went Samech, Lama al Shemidara din Pogatbo, because it's time for his final judgment to come, and it will leave him forgiven. And he'll be able, Mita Mechaperet, Misa Mechaperet. Death is an atonement. Rabbi Yoshua de Sachnin b'shem Rab Levi lefi shehara HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Adam Rishon dor malachav. So this brings us to the next Midrash I was referring to. This Rabbi Yehoshua of Sachnin, he said, I learned from Rabbi Levi, you're always supposed to quote your source. Okay, Claudine Gay of Harvard learned that the hard way. Thank God for the rest of us that she's out. So you're always supposed to quote your source. So that's why I put these on screen instead of making it like I'm a genius and I came up with all of this myself. I come up with a few things, mostly the jokes. It's not I don't know, that's what I'll be remembered for the most. So this Rabbi Yoshua of Saknin said in the name of Rabbi Levi that God Almighty, the Holy One, blessed is He, showed Adam Harishon, the first human, all generations to come and all kings, Dor v'Shamashav, all generations to come, all people who would be assisting kings. And B'cheven Sheharalo Shaul Nofel B'charav, and when he showed him the part of history that would be forthcoming, that King Saul, the first king of the Jews, will be having to kill himself by sword in the face of destruction and disaster. Amar Zehu Sicharan Shel B'necha. First Adam said to God, this is the reward of your children, Melech Rishon Shulomed Yisrael, the first king of your people Israel. Nofel B'charav, that he has to die by his own hand and by sword. Omar Le'liat Amart, God says, what, you fetching to me? Amor L'chahanya D'Makatrigin Ale. Yukfetch is not with me. Yukfetch, go speak to the Kohens, because he massacred them. And it says in the Bible, in Leviticus chapter 21, Vayomer Hashem Moshe, in Parshat Emor in Leviticus Vayikra Perek Chafal chapter 21, God said to Moshe, speak to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, and say to them. And so you go ahead and speak to the Kohanim you have a kvetch. Don't kvetch to me. And this midrash is of God talking to Adam. There's another midrash, again from this chapter 21 in Leviticus, Vayikra, Vayomer Shema Moshe Emor Lakonim ben Aaron. God said to Moshe, speak to the Kohanim, to the Kohens, the children of Aaron, saying to them, none shall defile himself, etc., etc. So in the Midrash Agada Levitic Vayikra Chafalef, in the Midrash Agada of Leviticus chapter 21, so we're taught similarly. It's also said that God also revealed to Moses, to Moshe Rabbeinu, the same idea. At the end of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, Kisha'ala Moshe el Arvot Moav, when Moses, you know the story perhaps, at the end of his life, brought the children of Israel to the brink, the east bank of the Jordan River, which, by the way, also is part of the Promised Land. Not only Judea, Samaria, west of the Jordan, but the east bank of the Jordan River also is part of Arutz Israel, where Reuven, Gad, and part of the tribe of Manasseh lived all those years until the exile by Assyria, by Ashur, when they exiled the 10 tribes. We'll learn about that, unfortunately, when we get to the Book of Kings. So Moshe brought the people to the brink of the Jordan River. He then would be dying. He would go up to Mount Nebo, where he would be allowed by God to see the Promised Land, and then God Almighty himself buries Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe, the Midrash says, because Moshe took the personal responsibility of guarding the bones of Joseph Tzaddik, and saw to it that Joseph's bones were brought from Egypt through the 40 years journey through the wilderness into the land of Israel. The promise was kept, and Yosef was buried in Shechem, what they call Nablus today, but it's Shechem. The Arabs call it Nablus. It's a long story. It's Shechem. So there's Kever Yosef, the grave of Joseph, tomb of Yosef is, to this day you could visit it, but you have to go with the army who protect you when you go there, because it's in Samaria, currently under Arab governance. So Moshe, because he took care to see that the bones of Yosef were taken care of, God rewarded him by personally attending to burying Moshe himself. So Moshe goes to the mountaintop at the Arvot Moav in the Moabite territories, right at the border. V'chala pnei HaKadosh Baruch Hey Kluf Bet Hey HaKadosh Baruch Hu She'yikanes El Eretz Yisrael, and God did not allow Moshe to come into the land. Lo Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahatir Shavuato God had sworn to Moshe that he's not going to let Moses into the land of Israel because of whatever that sin was in chapter 20 of the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, at Mei Meriva, the thing with the hitting of the rock. And there's a whole discussion what the real sin was. Won't go into it now. But whatever happened, whatever the sin was with Moshe at chapter 20, verses 2 to 18 in Bamidbar. So as a result of that, God said, you're not going to come into the land. So therefore, v'yamarlo ravlach al tosef daber elai od b'davar hazeh. So God, Moshe kept asking him, please, please, is there a way you would change your mind? Could you let me into the land of Israel? God said finally in chapter 3 of Deuteronomy, Devarim Gimel, don't ask me again. That's it. Don't ask me again. Shelo Yomar, etc., etc., Kamo Harav Kasha, Chama Ha Talmid Sarvan. It just isn't going to change. Okay. So then, B'kibel HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'her Ehu Kol Eretz Yisrael Kula. So God, as a compromise, said, here's what I will concede. I will allow you to see all the land of Israel, the entirety, north, south, east, west. V'chol dor v'dor uparnasav. And I will allow you to have a prophetic vision so that you will see all that will forthrightly forthcoming, the entire forthcoming history of the Jewish people from this moment till Messianic times, like what God allowed Adam Harishon, the first Adam. And you'll see all the Jews and all their leaders. Shne'emar v'yareu Hashem et kol haaretz miGilad v'yad Dan. God showed him the entirety of the land of Israel. That's in Deuteronomy 34. So among all the other things he showed him, Shaul HaMelekh, he showed him what would transpire with King Saul. He showed him what would transpire with all the kings that will in the future be leaders of Israel. Shaul HaMelekh, Harishon she'atid liyot Yisrael, Tzaddik Gamur. He showed him, here is King Saul, destined to be the first king of the Jewish people over Israel, and he will be a Tzaddik Gamur, and although he does certain things wrong, he will be deemed in history and religiously, in my eyes, God says, as a 100% righteous tzaddik. And God showed Moshe also that his destiny is that this man will die at the sword with his sons. Miyad Toma Moshe Alav Shalom. Ayin Hay stands for Alav Shalom. Immediately Moshe, of blessed memory, may peace be upon him. He should rest in peace. Moshe was shocked with the question. He says, how could that be? Amarlo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Lama Tama. And God says, what are you shocked? What's your shock? Amar Moshe Ribbonu Shalom. Moses said, Master of universe, Lo etamay techilat hamelech sheyimloch al banecha bazeh hamita yamut. He says, God, I shouldn't be shocked that this first king of yours, who is ever going to reign over your sons, your children, he's going to die like this? Omar lo Moshe, v'liatatama, Omar lo kohanim. This is the same as the Adam one. God says, you're asking me? Speak to the Kohens. Look what he did to the Kohens. That's what he did. So we learn from that, and I'm going to skip this Midrash here. I'm going to skip because it's long and time beckons. But the second Midrash is a continuation of what I just read you, where God says, and he did wrong by calling up an Ov V'yidoni, by calling up like a soothsayer, a fortune teller, someone that calls up ghosts. This is a biblical command. She'atid Shaul HaMelekh Yisrael v'atid lahareg al kohanim u'machis HaKadosh Baruch Hu ve'enu shemet. He's going to end up calling up such, and that's going to be part of the reason he'll be punished. And so it brings us, interestingly, to understanding something else about Saul. One of the terrible sins that Saul perpetrated, for which he gained atonement in his death, was killing out the Kohens in the city of Nov, by killing out the Kohanim. To refresh your memory, a man named Doeg the Edomite, Doeg, in English D-O-E-G, Doeg, in Hebrew Daled Vav Aleph Gimel. Doeg, simply for personal benefit and political gain, and the Talmud tells us he lost his place in the world to come for this. For a little bit of gain in this world, he gave up eternity. In order to get on Saul's good side, it was he who reported to Saul that the Kohanim, the Kohens in the city of Nov, had provided succor and food for David when he was fleeing from Saul. To refresh your memory, it was one of the times that Shaul was going through one of those phases where he was pursuing David to kill him. And David was on the run, and he went to the city of Nov, the city of Kohanim, and they had no idea. They had no idea that the king is running after him to kill him. What they understood is that David, to refresh your memory, is the king's son-in-law. The king loves him. The king gave his daughter Michal over to David. The king lets this guy play the harp for him. He loves him. So when David came and said, with his 400 men, I need food, so they were glad to help him out. They provided him with bread. And when he said, look, I'm unarmed, can you give me some weapon? They explained, this is a sanctuary city, not in the sense of political stuff today, but this is truly a sanctuary city. That's where the term comes from. The city of Nov is a sanctuary city, like the cities for someone who commits an accidental killing. Those are Arei Miklat. And here it's a sanctuary city. We're a city of priests. We don't have weapons here. All we have is a little museum where we have the sword that you, David, used when you killed Goliath. So that's on display. We could give you that. We have no other. So he said, I'll take it. Well, it's yours. I mean, it's like if what's his name? Da Vinci. If Da Vinci showed it, you hear this terrible story about these jerks who are protesting, some farmers protesting. So they threw soup or something, I think a soup on Mona Lisa just today or yesterday. Now they've got to figure out how to clean it up. They have people that restore these things. But what kind of people? So anyway, it's like if Leonardo da Vinci suddenly showed up and said, excuse me, can I don't know. I don't know if he's entitled to have, I'd like to just have the Mona Lisa for a day or two. I don't know. I don't know if he would have a good claim. Probably not. Once you give a gift, it's a gift, assuming you met all the requirements of the contract law. So David, if you recall, as a result of that, Doeg then went and told King Saul, do you know that the Kohens, the Kohanim of the city of Nov, they're in rebellion against you. They helped the man that you're trying to pursue. And as a result, Saul came and killed them all out. So they bring us in this in this next midrash, as I'm winding down now, they bring out on Psalm 120. Psalm 120. Shir Hamalot El Hashem Batsarat Ali. This is King David writing a psalm, a song of ascent. In my distress I call to the Lord. O Lord, save me from treacherous lips, from a deceitful tongue. Save me from treacherous lips, from a deceitful tongue. So the Gemara says he's talking about this situation with why did David happen to write that? He wrote a lot of psalms. He wrote more than 100 psalms. So he wrote about, why did he write about that? If you personally were sitting and writing little prayers to God, you'd probably write a prayer, God, please make me healthy. Please, members of who I know that I care about that aren't healthy, please give them refuah shalema, give them good health. Please don't want, like Tevye, I'm not asking to be so rich, but if I would be a little bit rich, would it hurt so much? If I could be a little bit rich, and if I could have this, and finally, if either the Yankees or the Mets or the Giants or the Jets, just one of them would win the postseason. That's all I ask for, just one of those New York teams. So, those are the things I would pray for, right? Would you pray to spare me of vicious, cruel, deceitful tongues? What can you profit, he writes. What profit is there? What do you gain from a deceitful tongue? So the Midrash talks about a Midrash Tehillim. Why does he say? He says, save my soul from the tongue of falsehood. The people of Israel said before the Almighty, and I'm trying to wrap up now. As you can see, I'm just about done. Just as you saved us from everything, please save me from this, and we'll no longer have any trouble, for the tongue of falsehood is the trouble. This is the source of all trouble. Evil tongues. All of a person's limbs, some sit, some stand, right? Your legs, your arms, some move your hands, some lift, some carry. The tongue, it doesn't sit, doesn't stand, it just rests in your mouth, just sits there idly, silently. It's like, of all the things, if you need to move a heavy box, the tongue won't do it. If you need to get from one place to another, the tongue won't do it. Well, nowadays, I guess you can talk into to get an Uber, but it's silent, doesn't, and yet look at the harm it does, both great and small, near and far. If it were a limb, it would be like any other limb walking on one foot. It would be like a one-footed limb. It's a sinner without benefit. And he mentions particularly what happened here. Let's just look at this quickly, where he talks about the evil of the tongue. Similarly, you find in Doeg, it brings 3 deaths. Loshon Horo, an evil tongue, gossip, an evil tongue is called the third because it calls 3. The one who speaks it, the one who speaks Loshon Horo, gossip, brings death on himself. The one who accepts it, the one who gives his gossip merit and validation by listening and nodding your head and agreeing, brings death upon himself or herself. And the one about whom it is spoken. Similarly, you find the Doeg. By his speaking Loshon Horo, telling King Saul that the Kohanes, the Kahanim, are in revolt against you, which was a lie, he brought death unto himself for eternity. And he has no portion in the world to come. And he killed Ahimelech, the priest, all the priests of the Kohanes of Kahanim of Nov. He killed all of them because of that. And Nov, the city of the priests. And he killed Saul. Because since Saul accepted the Loshon Horo, Saul burdened his soul with a sin that would not gain expiation and atonement until he was brought to killing himself in battle against the Philistines. As it says, and Saul died and his 3 sons. And that's what Loshon Horo does. And so we see again the power of Loshon Horo. And let's just, one last thing and I'm done. Last thing and I'm done. Remember how Saul was pursuing, and I'm sorry I'm running a little over, and certainly pull out, you can leave class now if you're over. I don't want you to hold it against me, and don't be afraid to come next time. But I really so chapter 26, in the past few weeks ago, we learned, and again, you can find it on YouTube, chapter 26. Just go on YouTube and search, I guess, Dov Fischer, 1 Samuel 26. Saul was pursuing David, and it was nighttime, and he and his men went to sleep in their encampment. And if you refresh your memory, David got together with 2 men. He went with 2 men, and they sneaked into the camp. They sneaked into the camp, but he said, Mi Yaredi Til Shaul, and Avishai came with him together, and they sneaked into the camp, and Abner, the chief of staff, was asleep with everyone else. And if you remember, David took Saul's spear and then went back to his base and then called out really loud, O king, and woke up Saul and conveyed, I could have killed you. I was so close that I pulled your spear, not to mention I could have speared you with it. together with your chief of staff. And instead I spared, spared, your life. And Saul said, you're right and I'm wrong. And one of the people that came with David that day, Avishai, said, kill him, this is your chance. God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Let me pin him to the ground, and that's it. David said, I will not do that. He's the anointed of God. Who possibly dares strike down the anointed of God and would hope to get away with that, to be forgiven by God? And David continued, as the Lord lives, that means he's making an oath, Chai Hashem, he's swearing in the name of God. The Lord himself will strike him down. David says, this is not for me to do. This is for God, and God will take care of this. It's not for me to take down the anointed of God. This has gone on too long. I'm going to leave him, and God will either strike him down or his time will come and he will die, like of illness or old age, or he'll go down to battle and perish. And because of that, in Psalm 7, David said, Shigayon of David, a mistake of, this is a psalm where David says, God Almighty, I'm acknowledging a terrible mistake I made. And I'm writing this psalm asking your forgiveness. In Psalm 7, what is the forgiveness he's asking? He's asking of God, I put a curse on the king of Israel. I put a curse on the king of Israel. David said before God, Master of the universe, do not punish me for my unintentional sins. And my unintentional sin, for time I won't go through it all, is that he put a curse on the king of Israel by saying he'll get his. He will either die of old age, or God will strike him down, or he'll die in battle. He shouldn't have said that. He should simply have known that and left it all to God. So I want to thank everyone for having become a bigger and bigger, more enthused class as the weeks have gone on. The class has grown from 8 or 9 people to close to 18. We've doubled, and we get another 20 or 30 watchers. Look at YouTube later on. And it's made it more exciting for me. It's made me do more study. I've looked more into commentary than I ever have. If you compare to my shame, the way I was teaching the book of Joshua, I don't even want to post it. I may have to reteach it, because with the class that I now have, I really feel I owe you my best. Not that I wasn't giving my best. I just didn't know I had that much more best in me. And so thank you for being part of this. And God willing, next Tuesday, we'll begin 2 Samuel, Shmuel Bet. Thank you very much.